Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going back to the very beginning. The episode from season 1, The Foundling, which was the very first episode that was aired. It was not the first episode we shot, but it was the first introduction to the audience of the Waltons as a TV series. So although I didn't particularly wear pigtails like up high like this, but I did wear pigtails when I went into audition for the role of Mary Ellen. So I thought, what the heck? In The Foundling, the Waltons have a little girl left basically on their doorstep. It takes a while to find out that she is deaf, but they take her in and make her one of the family for as long as they have her. Erica Hunton was the little girl who played Holly, and she was fabulous. Her mother, Ruth, was played by Charlotte Stewart, who you will remember then from Little House on the Prairie. Again, that mixing of the Waltons and Little House. There was a lot of that over the years. Musically, I noticed that the theme song of the Waltons was used quite a bit throughout this episode, that recurring Walton theme. That was not something that happened subsequently in episodes on a regular basis, but was noteworthy in this one. Cammie spoke about this episode in much more detail in her YouTube channel. One of the things that she commented on, which I also think is just adorable, is when she asks her daddy, "Where did you find me?" And he says, "Behind one of your mama's smiles." What a wonderful, sweet explanation. With eating scenes, there were those times when someone really had to shovel it in. In this case, Holly is supposed to be practically starving, and when Olivia offers her some food, she digs into that biscuit and just starts chowing down. Hopefully, poor little Erica didn't have to do that scene too many times and didn't have to scarf that biscuit too many times. In this episode, we meet Sheriff Ep Bridges for the first time. John Crawford was a staple on our show for numerous seasons and loved having him around. He was such a wonderful character. In this case, John goes to take Holly to the sheriff's office to make sure she hasn't been reported as a missing child. And in this case, the Jefferson County offices are in this building, which you might recognize as being used in later seasons as Boatwright University. In later episodes, whenever we went to the sheriff's office, it was on what we called Western Street and was just a single story. It was not this big imposing building that we see here in this very early episode. I love these little scenes where we're trying to teach Holly sign language. In this case, I am working with her and trying to put it together for all of us as cast members, because the doctor gave us instructions on how to finger sign, sign language. We all learned it in order to do what we needed to do in the episode. So a case of a skill coming into being because of something that we needed within the work. And we all got relatively adept at this. A beautiful moment when Holly finally puts it together and is able to associate the signs that John Boy is making with the actual words and the reality, and this door is opened for her to finally be able to communicate, and how wonderful that is. Interesting to note that at this period in time, Holly's father considers her a throwback because he doesn't understand that deaf does not mean ignorant, that it doesn't mean that she's simple or backward in any way, but he feels like that she is, and that he had a brother who was backward and wants to send her to a home because he doesn't want to deal with this in his life. Also being established early on was that we used to be barefoot a lot. And this happened in numerous episodes over the first season until somebody stepped on something and they determined it wasn't really safe for us all to be running around barefoot on the back lot, where there were nails and screws and various different other things that were just safety hazards. So then they started making us wear shoes all the time. Ike Godsey's store was always a source of enjoyment, particularly when they had the candy counter stocked. In this case, we have 2 cents to spend on candy and decide that we will get black licorice. I was not always a big fan of black licorice, but apparently at this point I was perfectly willing to eat it, as was everyone else. I also noticed in Ike's store that you see this Ouija board. And there was, of course, an episode later on where we make use of a Ouija board. So an interesting thing to have there on full display in Ike's store. The question's also been raised about how far was Ike's store from the Waltons. And in this particular episode, Ike mentions to Holly's father that the Waltons are about a half a mile down the road. Holly is intrigued by this little snow globe, and ultimately, in a lovely gesture, Jim Bob buys it for her, which creates all kinds of jealousy for Elizabeth, who is used to being the center of attention, the youngest, and now all of a sudden she's not. And that leads to her running away and getting trapped in the trunk and all of that. So it can be tough being a child. John Boy has a lovely little subplot establishing Marcia Woolery as his crush at school, and he is reading her poetry, and she is just so confused. Tammy Beulah did such a wonderful job of just being like, what is with this guy and what's going on here? The relationship between Mary Ellen and John Boy started in the homecoming and just continued on here. The teasing and the ribbing and just all the attitude between the two of them, and I always had such fun playing those scenes with Richard and giving him a hard time, and we did have fun with the dynamic between these 2 characters. Frequently throughout the series, we did listen to the radio, something we did in the homecoming. And in this case, we're talking about listening to Charlie McCarthy. So a lovely tribute to Edgar Bergen, who of course played our grandfather in the homecoming. And in this case, we are listening to his radio broadcast. When we did these radio things, sometimes we really weren't listening to an actual radio show. And in this case, we are laughing a lot and you can't even hear what's being said. So we are, I think, laughing too frequently, but it is really meant to set up the fact that Holly sees us all laughing and that she can't hear what it is that's happening that is evoking all of our laughter. This is John Boy's first kiss in the series, when he kisses Marcia Woolery and decides that perhaps action will have more impact on Marcia than writing her poetry. And that's what I have for you for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons, back to the very beginning with the Foundling. I'll be back with more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.